Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com. Today we're going to be looking at Game 5 from the match of the century, 1972 World Chess Championship between Bobby Fischer and Bobby Spassky. Now Spassky does have a game advantage, and he does have the white pieces, so he's going to be looking to extend his lead. Bobby Fischer looking to continue to play dominant with the black pieces and even this series up. Spassky starts out with pawn to d4, knight f6 from Bobby Fischer, Spassky c4, pawn e6, knight c3, and then bishop down here b4. Getting into the Nimzo Indian Defense. We don't see the Nimzo as much, mostly because people playing the white side don't like to have the double pawn structure on the queen side. So, more nowadays we're seeing this knight to f3, that sort of early move. But knight to c3, bishop down b4 was very common back in the day. Now white continues, knight f3, pawn to c5, protecting this bishop. Usually a bad idea to take. The bishop comes back here. Black's controlling the center of the board. White's giving up a central pawn. Not really how you want to go. Bobby Fischer also has the luxury of playing pawn to d6, pawn d5. If he plays d6, he can always push forward with pawn to e5. So it does leave him some options. But first starting with pawn to c5 with a nice little outpost here on b4, and then you're ready to push with his knight to c6. Pawn to e3, just solidifying the pawn chain, knight c6, bishop here, d3. And then we get into a variation which we don't see all that often nowadays, but Bobby Fischer definitely liked to play it. As the bishop takes on c3 and the pawn recaptures. Now Bobby Fischer is going to be looking to play pawn to d6, pushing forward with pawn to e5, really trying to break up the center of the board. Now, white really would like to counter this with his own pawn pushing forward, pawn to f4, usually preferred, but his knight on f3, although it's a development move early on, it actually gets in the way of what he wants to do right now. Also, Spassky on the queen side, he can't do too much. He has double pawns here on the c file, so he can't really extend like he would want to. This specific variation is one of the main reasons why people just don't like to play the Nimzo Indian as white, because they get these double pawns here and then they're kind of at the mercy of their opponent. Kind of clogs the center of the board. It's just not the way that people like to play when they're playing that pawn to d4 early on into the game. So usually you're seeing more the knight to f3 early on, and then they can extend on the queen side, which they usually like to do. But from here, there's two variations that white can go from here. He could first start with castling on the king side, e5 as we talked about, then knight to d2, castle, and then d5. That's one option. Spassky chose the other option, which is pawn to e4, and then after pawn e5 as we talked about, now just push forward with d5, forego castling on the king side for right now. This knight's going to come back here to e7, and then white has a few options. Usually you're going to see knight to d2, coming back here to f1, potentially coming to e3 or g3, so that they can come to this outpost here on f5. Now that's a lot of moves to kind of get to this outpost right here. Spassky decides to go ahead and fast track that and play just knight to h4, so he can come here very quickly if he wants to. Now pawn to h6 and then pawn f4. I think this is a little aggressive from Spassky. I get what he's trying to do here, just trying to break up the center of the board, but I would rather just play castle on the king side. Just wait, see what your opponent does, then you can push forward with pawn to f4. The move's not going anywhere, but your opponent could, after pawn to f4, blow things up. He could play bishop down here to g4 right away, which I really like. I think this is a great move. Stops the castling on the king side right away. Could decide to go ahead and take right now. I think you're not going to be castling. You're going to be taking back with your bishop. Or in this particular spot, Bobby Fischer plays knight to g6. This throws a wrench in the whole plan. So right away, I do think the pawn to f4 probably a little ambitious from Bobby Spassky. Spassky continues, knight takes on g6, pawn takes. Now the pawn takes on e5. We do see capture here. Bishop up here to e3. Pawn b6, just solidifying this pawn chain. The bishop was attacking the pawn here on c5. Also wants to open up the door for his light square bishop to get involved into the game. Now we see a castle on the king side for black, and then pawn to a4. Now, if you kind of look at it, both sides of the board, they have equal material. We do see a double pawn here on the G file for black. I don't mind that too much. It does open up the door for the rook to kind of control this. White on the opposite side has double pawns here on the C file. That's fine as well. What I like more about Bobby Fischer's position is he has a knight, and it seems kind of small on the surface, but these bishops aren't going to be doing too much with the clogged center of the board. They just can't control much of the board. This knight can hop over anywhere he wants to go. There's a nice outpost here on f4 if he can get to it. That's going to be very, very dangerous. It's just going to be very difficult for white to really take this position and turn it into anything really that great. So all in all, I think it's a very drawless position on board, but I do like black position a little bit more. From here we do see pawn to a5, just stopping the push here on a4. You never want your opponent to start pushing up on your queen side. Rook here to b1, attacking the backward pawn here on b6. It is kind of a pain to have to worry about protecting that, but he does have the queen right here on d8. First we see bishop to d7, attacking the pawn right here on a4. The queen is protecting this, but does need to make sure that he holds on to that material. First, rook up here to b2. Now rook b8. He can now get his queen involved into the game, not have to worry about protecting the pawn here on b6. Rook over here, f2. Queen e7, bishop back c2, so now he can get his queen involved into the game, not have to worry about protecting the pawn over here on a4. Pawn g5, so this double pawn here can actually start pushing forward, whereas you kind of see this double pawn here for white, it's kind of stuck here. It's not doing anything, can't push forward here, where Bobby Fischer can start to actually put a lot of pressure with his double pawns on the king side. Spassky, bishop back here d2. Queen e8, bishop back e1, queen to g6, threatening this pawn here on e4. So Bobby Fischer does have an attack here. This bishop on c2 is somewhat overloaded. It's defending both the pawn here on a4 and here on e4. So Bobby Fischer can start to kind of attack that weakness. Now queen up here d3 does add another protection layer on the square here on e4. Knight over here h5. Rook takes, rook takes. We do see an exchange on board, which I think is better for Bobby Fischer, because both sides, neither side was really going to do too much. But Spassky had a lot of the pieces in place to defend properly. It's going to be very difficult for Bobby Fischer to kind of break through and do anything, because you got two rooks back here, two bishops. Everything seemed fine for Spassky to defend. But after bishop to d1, you can really tell that white is in full-on I'm in defend mode. If your bishops are on the first rank when you are 26 moves in for white, you're not looking to win the game. You're looking to just thwart any attack that comes through. But this is just really bad. These bishops are really just controlling the sides of the board. They're not controlling the center of the board, which is where Bobby Fischer can start to attack here. So not really a good game plan. If they were on bishop on d2 and bishop on e2 as well, that's a little bit better. Can start to control a little bit more of the side and the center of the board. But on this first rank, that's very, very poor. But it's still going to be difficult for Bobby Fischer to do anything. But he starts out with knight to f4, probably his best, chance to actually try to make something happen. Attacking the queen right here. He's still attacking the pawn over here on a4. The bishop attacking this. The bishop's still holding on to it. And then from here we see Bobby Spassky make, up until this point, the worst move so far. Now we're only 5 games in, so take that for what it is. But he makes a very, very bad choice, and he plays queen to c2. Now he was kind of looking at it and says, okay, I still need to be able to protect this pawn on e4, because if the queen comes down on e4 unprotected, it's just lights out. It's just all bad news for white. So he wants to come back, still protect this pawn on a4, but it was already protected. Having it with the queen here is just not the way he wants to go, because bishop to a4, Bobby Spassky was actually forced to resign after this move. There's just no way to really hold on to it. Bobby Fischer does win game 5, and they tie up the series. Now, we'll go through, sometimes I'll get asked in videos, hey, how does this continue? Like, why would Bobby Spassky in this particular spot lose? So we'll kind of walk through it. let's say the queen takes right here, somewhat common. Now the queen takes on e4, and this is threatening mate. Queen to g2 mate. The queen is not going to be able to get involved into the action and save anything. So all in all, it's just a matter of, do we hold on for more moves? So queen up here, e8. Yeah, we're just sacrificing moves so that we don't get checkmated right away. Everything else is you're going to lose right away. It's just all bad news from here. So queen e8, takes the bishop here, check. All of a sudden we kind of move around, and at the end of the day, we're just going to have a checkmate. There's no way for white to hold on. Now, if we come back and say, okay, after bishop takes on a4, well, let's say that queen to d2. We'll give up that pawn. That's fine, but we don't want to lose the game. So queen to d2. Bishop takes. The queen now is forced to come to d1, but then the e4 pawn falls. This is going to be bad. Queen to d2. Got to protect that checkmate here on g2, but now we can just see the knight takes on g2. This is just really bad. The queen can't really take because then the bishop's going to fall. Check. Just going to gobble up more material here on c3. That's going to be bad. If we try to get creative, bishop up here, g3, since it is being attacked, then all of a sudden, knight here to e3. There's just no way that white's really able to defend this. Queen f2, check. King e7, that's fine. Pawn h3, start to just gobble up material. The pawn here on c4 is going to fall. All of a sudden we have 3 pawns from white. We have 7 pawns from black. Black is all up in white's side of the board, and he can just start to gobble up more of this material. White, on the other hand, really can't move. As soon as he moves, this bishop can't get involved, but as soon as he moves his queen, he's just going to lose more material. So, Bobby Spassky looked at it and said, all right, that was a terrible mistake with queen to c2. I just have to resign in this position. Now, keep in mind, if we come back one move, if you'd have played just queen to b1, this is fine. He still needs to hold on to e4, which is the most critical square on the board, but he's still holding down the fort on a4 with his bishop, which is really what he needs to do. But he did miss that, played queen to c2. It's crazy, just this one subtle move allowed Bobby Fischer to come in and immediately win the game in a position that was probably drawn. I mean, I would imagine in just a few more moves, they would have shaken hands and gone to the next game, but Spassky would have still been up a game. So, all in all, terrific game from Bobby Fischer. What's interesting is after the game, after they've tied this up, Bobby Fischer went to his second, which is kind of his coach, his sidekick during these matches, Bill Lombardi, and he actually told him, hey, I've got a surprise coming up for Game 6, so just get ready for it, which you can only imagine what Bobby Fischer means by that. So that's going to be pretty exciting. If you're not too familiar with Game 6, make sure you look out for that video. It's going to be a good one. But thank you guys for tuning in for Game 5. It's definitely a good one. Series even up at 2.5 points each. I'll see you guys in the next one.